It had been 3 days since my daughter-in-law vanished with my grandson. When I found what was hiding in their closet, I realized this wasn't a disappearance. It was something much worse. My name is Margaret Collins, and I'm 71 years old. For 32 years, I worked as a social worker specializing in domestic violence cases. I thought I'd seen every kind of family crisis imaginable. I'd investigated homes where children hid bruises under long sleeves, where women made excuses for black eyes, where financial abuse masqueraded as love and protection. I was wrong. It had been 3 days since my daughter-in-law vanished with my grandson. When I found what was hiding in their closet, I realized this wasn't a disappearance, it was something much worse. Let me take you back to where this nightmare began, because understanding how predators operate within families might just save someone you love. 4 months ago, my son David died in a car accident. Single vehicle crash on Highway 9 at 2 in the morning. The police said he fell asleep at the wheel, lost control, and hit a tree. The impact killed him instantly. David was only 36 years old, a dedicated father, a careful driver, a man who never took unnecessary risks. He was the kind of person who checked his tire pressure every month, who never drove when he was tired, who lectured Tyler about seatbelt safety every time they got in the car. The funeral was devastating, but somehow Jennifer, my daughter-in-law, seemed to handle it better than anyone expected. She was composed during the service, organized with the arrangements, taking care of the insurance paperwork with an efficiency that impressed everyone who knew her. "Mom, Margaret," she said to me after the service, taking my hands in hers with what seemed like genuine warmth. "I know this is hard on all of us, but Tyler and I are going to be fine. David left us well provided for." The life insurance payout was substantial, $2.1 million, plus the house was paid off, and David's investment accounts transferred to Jennifer as the surviving spouse. Tyler, my 9-year-old grandson, was set for life. At least, that's what we all believed. But something felt wrong from the very beginning. In my 3 decades of social work, I developed instincts about people that went beyond what they said or how they appeared in public. When families are under stress, you see their true nature emerge. Some people fall apart and need support. Others become controlling and manipulative. A few become calculating. Jennifer fell into that last category, though it took me weeks to understand what I was seeing. The first red flag was subtle. The kind of thing that someone without my professional background might have dismissed as normal grief behavior. 2 weeks after the funeral, Tyler didn't show up for our usual Saturday visit. We'd maintained this tradition since he was 3 years old. Every Saturday, Tyler would spend the day with me, and we'd do something special together. The zoo, the science museum, baking cookies, working in my garden. It was our sacred time. When I called to ask where he was, Jennifer answered with an excuse I'd heard 1,000 times in my professional life, the kind of deflection that sounds reasonable but feels wrong. "Oh, Mom, Margaret, Tyler's not feeling well today. Maybe next weekend? He's been having such a hard time adjusting, and I think he needs to stay close to home right now." But I heard Tyler's voice in the background, clear and energetic, asking who was on the phone. Jennifer's voice became sharp and commanding in a way I'd never heard before. "Go to your room, Tyler, now." That tone. I'd heard it before, in homes where children were walking on eggshells, where they'd learned to make themselves invisible to avoid triggering an adult's anger. The second red flag came a week later. Tyler's school called me at home, which was unusual since Jennifer was listed as the primary contact. "Mrs. Collins, we're updating our emergency contact information for the new school year. Jennifer mentioned you might no longer be available as Tyler's backup contact. She said there might be some family changes coming up." I assured them that was incorrect. I'd always been Tyler's emergency contact, and nothing had changed from my perspective. I'd never missed a school play, never forgotten a parent-teacher conference when Jennifer couldn't attend, never failed to pick him up when he was sick and needed someone. "That's strange," the school secretary said. "Jennifer seemed quite certain that you wouldn't be available anymore." She mentioned something about you having health issues. Health issues. I was 71 years old, but I was in better shape than most people 20 years younger. I walked 3 miles every morning, maintained my own garden, and had never missed a day of work due to illness in my entire career. But it had changed. Jennifer was systematically cutting me out of Tyler's life, and she was using lies to do it. The third red flag was the security code. I'd had the access code to David's house for years, for emergencies, to check on things when they traveled, to water plants when they went on vacation. It was a practical arrangement that had never been a problem. Last month, when I stopped by to drop off Tyler's birthday present, a science kit he'd been asking for, the code didn't work. The little electronic panel beeped angrily at me, and the red light stayed solid. Jennifer had changed it without telling me. When I called to ask about it, she was ready with an explanation that sounded perfectly reasonable. Oh, the security company recommended we update all the codes after David's death. You know, for safety. Identity theft is such a problem these days, and they said anyone who knew David might have access to personal information that could be misused. Safety from whom? I was David's mother. I'd been in that house hundreds of times. I'd held Tyler when he was born, helped Jennifer through postpartum depression, been there for every milestone and crisis. But Jennifer was treating me like a potential threat to her family's security. 3 days ago, my suspicions transformed into genuine terror. I called Jennifer's phone Tuesday morning to arrange this weekend's visit with Tyler. We hadn't seen each other in almost 3 weeks, which was the longest gap since Tyler was born. The call went straight to voicemail. I tried again that afternoon. Voicemail again. The same automated message, but something about it felt ominous now. By Wednesday, I was calling every hour. Tyler's school said he hadn't been there for 2 days. Jennifer had called in saying they were dealing with a family emergency and Tyler would be out indefinitely. What family emergency? I was David's only living relative. If there was a family emergency, wouldn't I know about it? Thursday morning, I called the police. The officer who took my call was patient, but clearly skeptical. Ma'am, adults have the right to travel with their children. Unless you have evidence of foul play or child endangerment, there's not much we can do. Has she made any threats? Any indication she's harming the child? How could I explain my social worker instincts to a police officer? How could I tell him that something felt wrong because of the way Jennifer's voice had changed when she thought I wasn't listening? How could I describe the micro-expressions I'd noticed during family gatherings over the past few months? The brief flashes of calculation when she thought no one was watching, the way she'd started controlling every interaction between Tyler and me. Just intuition, I said, knowing how weak it sounded. I understand you're worried, he said kindly. But sometimes people need space to grieve. Children especially can have behavioral changes after losing a parent. Call us back if you don't hear from them by Monday, and we'll see about doing a welfare check. But I knew this wasn't about grieving. This wasn't about Tyler needing space. This was about something much worse. I'd spent 3 decades recognizing the signs of systematic abuse, and everything about Jennifer's behavior over the past 4 months fit the pattern of someone isolating a victim before escalating to more serious abuse. Where are you watching this from? I'd love to know how far this story travels. Drop your location in the comments. And if you've ever had that gut feeling that something was wrong with someone you love, you'll understand what happened next. Sometimes the people closest to us are the ones hiding the darkest secrets. Thursday evening, I made a decision that would change everything. I was going to David's house, and I was going to find out what Jennifer was really hiding. Because 32 years of professional experience had taught me that when someone is systematically isolating a child from their support network, they're preparing for something that requires no witnesses. I drove to David's house Friday morning with my hands shaking on the steering wheel, but my mind was clear and focused in the way it had been during thousands of crisis interventions throughout my career. In all my years of social work, I'd investigated hundreds of homes where children were at risk. But this was different in the most terrifying way possible. This was my family. The house looked normal from the outside, a two-story colonial in a neighborhood where children rode bikes on tree-lined streets and neighbors knew each other's names. Jennifer's car wasn't in the driveway, which I expected, but something felt off about the way the curtains were drawn tight across every window, the way no lights were visible through the glass, even though it was overcast and gloomy. I walked around the perimeter first, another habit from my professional life. Always assess the situation before entering. Always look for signs of what you might find inside. The backyard showed signs of recent activity, but not the kind you'd expect from a family dealing with a grief-related emergency. Patio furniture had been moved, arranged as if someone had been sorting through items. Tyler's bike was gone from its usual spot by the garage, but his soccer ball and baseball glove were still there, covered in several days' worth of morning dew. Most telling of all, there were 2 coffee cups on the patio table, both with dried coffee residue in the bottom. One was Jennifer's favorite mug, a blue ceramic piece Tyler had made her in art class. The other was plain white, like something you'd find at a hotel or office. Jennifer didn't drink coffee. She was a tea person, always had been. She used to joke that David got enough caffeine for both of them. So who had been drinking coffee at Jennifer's house? I tried calling Tyler's cell phone, the one David had given him for emergencies. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail, but I could hear it ringing inside the house. The sound was coming from what I knew was Tyler's bedroom on the 2nd floor. Tyler was notorious for forgetting his phone, but David had trained him to never leave home without it. If they'd really left for a family emergency, he would have taken it. Tyler knew the rules about the emergency phone, unless they'd left in a hurry, or unless they hadn't left at all. I stood at the front door, my social worker instincts at war with my grandmother's heart. Everything I'd learned in 32 years told me to document what I observed, contact the authorities, follow proper procedures. Never enter a potentially dangerous situation without backup. But my grandson might be inside, possibly in danger, and the police had already told me they wouldn't take action until Monday. I pulled out the spare key David had given me years ago, the one Jennifer didn't know I still had, hidden behind the loose brick by the front steps. The door opened silently, well-oiled hinges moving without a sound. The house felt wrong immediately. Not empty, but wrong. Like someone had been there recently but was trying to make it look abandoned. There was a smell in the air, faint but noticeable to someone trained to assess living conditions. The smell of fear, stress, and something else I couldn't immediately identify. In the living room, I found the first real evidence that something significant had happened here. The couch cushions were askew, as if someone had been searching for something hidden underneath. A lamp was slightly out of place, moved about 6 inches from where Jennifer always kept it. Picture frames on the mantel had been shifted, and I could see clean rectangles on the dusty surface where other items had been removed. But it was too neat to be a robbery. This was someone looking for specific items, someone who knew exactly what they were searching for. I moved through the house methodically, the way I'd been trained to document living conditions in potentially dangerous situations. Kitchen. Dirty dishes in the sink, but not many. 2 plates, 2 sets of silverware, 1 small bowl that looked like it had contained cereal. The refrigerator hummed normally, and when I opened it, I found fresh milk with yesterday's date, sandwich meat that wasn't expired, Tyler's favorite juice boxes. If they'd left for an extended trip, why leave fresh food? Why not clean out the refrigerator to prevent spoilage? In the master bedroom, I discovered more pieces of the puzzle. Jennifer's jewelry box was gone, not the expensive pieces David had given her, but the everyday items she wore regularly. Her favorite perfume was missing from the dresser. But David's watch collection was still there, displayed exactly as he'd left it. His laptop was still on the bedside table, plugged in and charging. Someone had taken personal, easily portable items while leaving behind anything that might be tracked or traced. I climbed the stairs to Tyler's room, my heart pounding with each step. His door was closed, which was unusual. Tyler never closed his door unless he was in trouble or upset about something. I turned the handle slowly and stepped inside. Tyler's room looked like a tornado had hit it, but not a random tornado. This was systematic. Dresser drawers had been pulled out and emptied, their contents sorted into piles on the floor. His closet doors were standing open, clothes scattered everywhere. His backpack was gone, along with his favorite stuffed animal and the collection of rocks he'd been building since he was 5. Someone had packed in a hurry, taking only the most important items while leaving everything else in chaos. But then I heard something that made my blood freeze. The sound of a car door slamming in the driveway. I moved quickly to Tyler's window and looked down. Jennifer's car was back, and she wasn't alone. A tall man I didn't recognize was getting out of the passenger side, looking around carefully as if checking for witnesses. He was well-built, probably in his 40s, with the kind of alert posture that suggested either military or law enforcement background. They were coming back, and I had maybe 30 seconds before they reached the front door. 30 seconds to hide, or 30 seconds to confront them and demand to know where Tyler was. My social worker training kicked in. Gather information before taking action. Sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is reveal what you know before you understand the full scope of the threat. I heard the front door open, followed by Jennifer's voice, tense and urgent. "We shouldn't have come back. This is too risky." The man's voice was deeper, calmer, with the kind of professional composure that suggested he'd done this before. "We need those documents, the flights tonight, and we can't get new identities without them." Flight? New identities? I needed to hear more, but I also needed to hide. Tyler's closet was the closest option. It was large, with plenty of space behind his winter coats and sports equipment. I slipped inside and pulled the door almost closed, leaving just enough gap to hear their conversation clearly. But when I turned around in the darkness of the closet, I wasn't alone. Tyler was there, curled up in the far corner like a frightened animal, clutching an empty juice box like a lifeline. He was thinner than when I'd seen him 3 weeks ago, his clothes dirty and wrinkled. His eyes were wide with fear. But when he saw me, they filled with relief so profound, it nearly broke my heart. When he started to speak, I put my finger to my lips, then gathered him into my arms as quietly as possible. "Grandma," he whispered against my ear, so quietly I could barely hear him. "They're going to hurt you. I heard them talking about it." My heart stopped, but before I could respond, Jennifer and the man entered Tyler's room, their voices now clearly audible through the thin closet door. What I heard them say made me realize that my son David hadn't died in an accident. He'd been murdered, and I was about to discover exactly how they'd done it. If you're holding your breath right now, you're not alone. This is the moment everything I thought I knew about my family shattered into pieces. But what I discovered next, about Tyler, about David's death, about what Jennifer was really planning, that's when I realized my 32 years of professional training were about to be put to the ultimate test. Drop a comment if you've ever discovered something about your family that changed everything you thought you knew. Sometimes the people we trust most are the ones hiding the darkest secrets. Crammed in that closet with Tyler, listening to my daughter-in-law and a stranger discuss something that involved flights and new identities, I felt something I hadn't experienced in 32 years of social work. Pure, paralyzing terror, mixed with rage so intense it threatened to overwhelm my professional training. But Tyler's small hand gripping mine brought me back to reality. Whatever was happening here, my grandson needed me to be professional Margaret, not terrified grandmother Margaret. He needed me to use every skill I'd learned in 3 decades of crisis intervention. Jennifer's voice drifted clearly through the closet door, and what she said confirmed my worst fears. "The insurance money cleared yesterday, $2.1 million, just like you predicted it would be." The man, I still didn't know his name, sounded pleased with himself. "And the life insurance investigator bought the accident story completely?" "Michael, relax. Single car accident, evidence of fatigue, no other vehicles involved. David even had caffeine pills in his system. I made sure of that. Perfect setup for someone falling asleep at the wheel. Michael. So that was his name. And they were talking about David's death like it was something they'd planned. Tyler's grip on my hand tightened painfully. In the dim light filtering through the closet door, I could see tears streaming down his face silently. This wasn't the first time he'd heard this conversation. My grandson had been living with his father's killers for 4 months, forced to listen to them discuss the murder they'd committed. Jennifer continued with the casual tone of someone discussing weekend plans. The transfer to the overseas accounts is scheduled for tonight. By tomorrow morning, we'll be in London with new passports, and Margaret Collins won't be a problem anymore. Speaking of the old lady, Michael said, you're sure she doesn't suspect anything? She's been asking a lot of questions lately. That's tonight's problem, Jennifer replied dismissively. Car accident, just like David. Elderly woman, late at night. Maybe she fell asleep at the wheel too. Or maybe she was distraught about losing her son and grandson. Either way, by the time anyone investigates, we'll be gone. They were planning to kill me tonight. Not only had they murdered my son, but they were planning to eliminate me as well, making it look like grief had driven me to a fatal accident. And the kid? Michael asked, and my blood turned to ice. Tyler comes with us, Jennifer said matter-of-factly. He's young enough to adapt to a new identity. And honestly, if something happened to him too right after David's death, that would raise questions about the insurance payout. Better to keep him until we're settled. Keep him until they're settled. Then what? I'd worked enough child endangerment cases to know that Tyler represented a loose end to these people. A 9-year-old who'd witnessed his father's murder and heard planning discussions wasn't an asset. He was a liability that would eventually need to be eliminated. In the closet, Tyler turned his face against my shoulder and sobbed silently. I stroked his hair and tried to project calm while my mind raced through everything I'd learned about crisis intervention. Step 1. Assess immediate danger. Step 2. Gather critical information. Step 3. Develop action plan. Step 4. Execute plan using available resources. Immediate danger. Tyler and I were trapped in a closet with 2 murderers who had a specific timeline for killing me and fleeing the country. Critical information. They believed they had until tonight to handle me. Their flight was scheduled for tonight. They needed documents from this house to complete their escape plan. Available resources, my 32 years of professional experience, Tyler's knowledge of what he'd overheard, and the element of surprise. They had no idea I knew what they were planning. Jennifer's voice again. Did you find what we came for? Documents are in the kitchen safe, Michael confirmed. Passports, birth certificates for the new identities, backup credit cards, everything we need. Good. Let's grab them and get out of here. I want to scout Margaret's house before tonight. Make sure we understand the layout and timing. Scout my house. They were planning my murder down to the last detail, the way they'd obviously planned David's. But then Tyler did something that almost gave us away. He shifted position, trying to get more comfortable, and his foot knocked against a toy robot on the closet floor. The sound was tiny, but in the silent house, it seemed to echo like a gunshot. Michael's voice sharpened immediately. What was that? What was what? Jennifer sounded irritated, focused on whatever document she was sorting through. I heard something. From the closet. Footsteps moved toward us. Tyler pressed against me, trembling, and I could feel his terror like a physical force. The closet door started to open. In that moment, I made a split-second decision based on everything I'd learned about crisis intervention with children. Sometimes survival requires courage from the smallest among us, and sometimes the best protection is a calculated risk that saves everyone. I leaned close to Tyler's ear and whispered urgently, Tyler, I need you to be very brave. When I count to 3, run out crying and call for your mommy. Keep them busy for 30 seconds while I get out through the bathroom window. Can you do that for Grandma? Tyler nodded, his jaw set with determination that reminded me heartbreakingly of David at that age. Even in terror, my grandson was ready to be brave to save us both. 1, 2, 3. Tyler burst out of the closet, sobbing loudly and convincingly. Mommy! Mommy! I was so scared. I heard noises and I thought someone was going to hurt me. Jennifer's voice immediately shifted to fake maternal concern. Tyler, sweetheart, what are you doing in there? I thought you were sleeping. I was hiding because I heard loud voices and I thought the bad men came back. Tyler's performance was perfect. The fear in his voice was real, but he was channeling it into exactly the story we needed. Michael's voice, sharp with suspicion. What bad men? What is he talking about? While Tyler's Oscar-worthy performance kept them occupied, I slipped out of the closet and made my way to Tyler's bathroom, which had a window facing the backyard. 32 years of home visits had taught me to always identify multiple exit routes, and Tyler's bathroom window had a clear drop to the soft garden bed below. 2 minutes later, I was walking up to the front door with my heart pounding, but my expression composed in the way I'd learned to project calm authority even in the most dangerous situations. I knocked firmly on the door that I had every right to enter. Jennifer answered, holding Tyler's hand, both of them looking appropriately concerned. Tyler's eyes met mine briefly, and I saw the relief there, mixed with pride that he'd successfully helped us escape. Margaret, what are you doing here? Jennifer's surprise seemed genuine. I've been worried sick about Tyler, I said, letting relief flood my voice as I saw my grandson safe in the doorway. 3 days with no word, the school calling me. I thought maybe something had happened. I was in the neighborhood and decided to stop by. We're fine, Jennifer said quickly. We just needed some time away. Family emergency, like I mentioned to the school. Well, thank goodness, I said, crouching down to Tyler's level. Tyler, sweetheart, are you okay? You look upset. Tyler, still playing his part perfectly. I got scared, Grandma. I was hiding because I thought I heard bad people, but Mommy says they were just delivery men. Delivery men? I looked up at Jennifer with grandmotherly concern. At this hour? Michael appeared in the doorway behind Jennifer, and I got my first clear look at David's killer. He was exactly what I'd expected, someone who could be charming when necessary but had the dead eyes of a predator. I'm Michael, he said, extending his hand with practiced warmth. Jennifer's friend. I've been helping her through this difficult time. How thoughtful, I said, shaking his hand while noting the calluses that suggested physical labor and the small scar on his knuckle that looked like it came from violence. I don't think we've met before. Michael's been wonderful, Jennifer said quickly, really supportive during the transition. Transition. That was an interesting word choice for someone supposedly grieving her husband. I should go, I said, straightening up. I just wanted to make sure Tyler was safe. You know how grandmothers worry. Of course, Jennifer said, but I caught her exchanging a look with Michael, a look that said they needed to adjust their timeline. Actually, Margaret, Michael said smoothly, since you're here, maybe we could talk. About Tyler's future? We've been making some plans that might affect the whole family. This was it. They were going to try to accelerate their timeline, bring me into their trap earlier than planned. That would be wonderful, I said with genuine grandmother enthusiasm. When did you have in mind? Tonight? Jennifer suggested. Say, around 9? You could come by your house, make it more comfortable for discussing family matters. 9 o'clock tonight, exactly when they'd already planned to kill me. Perfect, I said. I'll make coffee. We can discuss Tyler's future properly. As I walked back to my car, I knew 3 things with absolute certainty. First, they were going to try to murder me at 9 o'clock tonight in my own home. Second, Tyler was going to be alone in this house until they left for their flight, vulnerable, terrified, and surrounded by evidence of their crimes. And third, I had approximately 8 hours to use everything I'd learned in 32 years of social work to turn the tables on two killers who had no idea they were about to face someone who'd spent 3 decades getting confessions from dangerous people. Sometimes people ask me what was the hardest lesson I learned about people in my career. It was this: the most dangerous ones are the ones who can look you in the eye and smile while they plan your destruction. But here's what they didn't count on. 32 years of dealing with dangerous people had taught me a few things about planning destruction myself. If you've ever had to face someone who you realized was far more dangerous than they appeared, share your story in the comments. And if you're wondering what I did next, let me tell you. What I planned for 9 o'clock that night would have made my old social work supervisor proud. Driving away from David's house, my hands were rock steady on the steering wheel for the first time in 3 days. Terror has a way of crystallizing your thinking when you've been trained to function under pressure, and 32 years of crisis intervention had taught me something crucial. Panic is a luxury you can't afford when lives are at stake. I had 8 hours to save Tyler and myself. More importantly, I had 8 hours to ensure that Jennifer and Michael faced justice for murdering my son and planning to murder me. But first, I needed evidence. Professional, documented, legally admissible evidence that would put them away forever. My first stop was the bank where David had maintained his account since college. If Jennifer thought she could steal David's life insurance money and disappear without leaving a trail, she'd underestimated the paper trail that money leaves behind. I'd handled dozens of financial abuse cases. I knew exactly how to follow the money. "Mrs. Collins, I'm so sorry for your loss," said Amanda Peterson, David's account manager, and someone I'd met several times over the years during family financial planning meetings. "How can I help you today?" "I need to understand the transactions on David's account since his death," I said, settling into the chair across from her desk. As Tyler's grandmother and emergency contact, I want to make sure his inheritance is being handled properly. It was a reasonable request from a concerned grandmother, and Amanda was happy to help. 20 minutes later, I had copies of every transaction, and the pattern was clear and damning. Large cash withdrawals every week since David's death, always just under the amount that would trigger automatic reporting. Wire transfers to 3 different offshore accounts in amounts that suggested systematic money laundering. A cashier's check for $50,000 made out to M. Rodriguez just 2 weeks after David's funeral. Most telling of all, a pending wire transfer scheduled for tonight at 11 p.m., 2 hours after they planned to kill me. The remaining $18 million would disappear into an account in the Cayman Islands 30 minutes before their flight departed. They'd timed my murder to happen just before the final transfer. Once I was dead and they were airborne, the money would be completely untraceable. "Mrs. Peterson," I said carefully, "this cashier's check to Monsieur Rodriguez. Do you remember anything about that transaction?" She pulled up the details on her computer. "Yes, actually. Jennifer came in with a man she said was a financial advisor helping her with estate planning. She said David had promised to pay him for some consulting work before he died, and she wanted to honor that commitment." "Did the man show identification?" "He did. Michael Rodriguez, licensed financial planner." She paused, frowning at her screen. "Though, now that you mention it, something seemed off about the interaction. Jennifer seemed nervous, and the man was very controlling about how she filled out the paperwork. This was exactly the kind of detail that would matter in court. I asked Amanda to make me copies of everything related to that transaction, including any security camera footage from that day. My second stop was the police station, but not to file a report. Not yet. I needed to speak with Detective Ray Morrison, a man I'd worked with on dozens of domestic violence cases over the years, someone who understood both the law and the psychology of predators. "Margaret!" Ray's face lit up when he saw me, then quickly shifted to concern. "I heard about David. I'm so sorry for your loss." Ray, I need your help, but not in an official capacity. Not yet. I explained the situation carefully, the way I'd learned to present evidence in court, the suspicious timing of David's death just before Jennifer met Michael, the life insurance investigation that seemed rushed and superficial, the systematic isolation of Tyler from extended family, the financial transfers that suggested money laundering, the planned disappearance tonight. Ray listened without interrupting, taking notes in the careful way experienced cops develop when something big is about to break. Margaret, he said finally, this sounds like you're describing a murder-for-hire scheme. We need to bring Jennifer in for questioning immediately. Not yet, I said firmly. If you move too early, they'll run, and Tyler will disappear forever into whatever network these people are connected to. But if we let them come to me tonight, you want to use yourself as bait. I want to get a confession, on tape, with Tyler safely out of the way and backup ready to move in the moment we have what we need. Ray shook his head slowly. Margaret, you're talking about confronting two people who've already committed murder. These aren't domestic abusers you can intimidate with your social worker credentials. These are professional criminals. Exactly, I said. And professional criminals are arrogant. They think they're smarter than everyone else, especially someone like me, an elderly woman, recently widowed, grieving the loss of her son. They see me as a victim, not a threat. I outlined my plan in detail. At 7 p.m., I'd return to David's house and get Tyler out safely, using the excuse of taking him to dinner. At 8 p.m., I'd set up recording equipment in my home with Ray's help. At 9 p.m., Jennifer and Michael would arrive, expecting to kill a helpless elderly woman who had no idea what they were planning. Instead, they'd find themselves talking to someone who knew exactly what they'd done and exactly how to get them to confess. This is insane, Margaret, Ray said, but I could see him thinking through the logistics. This is justice, I replied, and it's Tyler's only chance at a normal life. What if something goes wrong? What if they don't confess? What if they just kill you and leave? I pulled out my phone and showed him a text message I'd prepared. Ray, there's something urgent I need to tell you about David's death. Can you come by tonight around 9:15? I have evidence that changes everything. If I don't manually cancel this text by 9:10 p.m., it sends automatically. You'll arrive to find either a confession in progress or a crime scene. Either way, you'll have probable cause to search their belongings, freeze the overseas accounts, and stop them from making that flight. Ray stared at me for a long moment, then started laughing. 32 years of social work, and you're thinking like a cop. I'm thinking like someone who refuses to let my son's killers escape with my grandson. By 6 p.m., I had everything I needed. A detailed financial trail showing premeditation and money laundering. Recording equipment provided by Ray unofficially. Tyler's rescue plan mapped out down to the minute. And most importantly, a strategy for getting Jennifer and Michael to confess that played directly into their arrogance and overconfidence. They thought they were dealing with a grieving, helpless grandmother who posed no threat to their carefully planned escape. They were about to meet a woman who'd spent 3 decades getting dangerous people to tell her the truth about their crimes. But first, I had to get Tyler to safety, because no matter how confident I was in my plan, I would not put my grandson at risk in a confrontation with 2 killers. At exactly 7 p.m., I returned to David's house and knocked on the front door with a grandmother's cheerful smile. Jennifer answered, and I could see Michael in the background, both of them clearly surprised by my return. Margaret, what are you doing back? I felt terrible about leaving so abruptly earlier, I said warmly. I was thinking, Tyler's been through so much, and I haven't seen him in weeks. Would it be all right if I took him to dinner? Just the 2 of us? I promised to have him back by 8:30. I watched Jennifer and Michael exchange glances. They were calculating whether this would interfere with their 9 o'clock timeline for killing me. I don't know, Jennifer said slowly. Tyler's been having some behavioral issues lately. Maybe it's better if he stays home tonight. Please, Mom, Jennifer, Tyler said from behind her, and I could hear the careful note in his voice. He understood what I was really asking. I really want to go to dinner with Grandma. I've missed her. Just for an hour and a half, I said reasonably. We'll go to that little pizza place he loves and I'll have him back before his bedtime. It would mean so much to me. Michael stepped forward. Actually, that might be a good idea. Give Tyler some normalcy, you know? And Jennifer and I have some planning to do for tomorrow anyway. Planning for their flight. Planning for what they'd do after I was dead. Wonderful, I said brightly. Tyler, go get your jacket. As Tyler ran upstairs, Michael moved closer to me. Just so we're clear, Margaret, we'll see you at 9 tonight? Absolutely, I said. I'm looking forward to our talk about Tyler's future. 20 minutes later, Tyler and I were sitting in my car in the parking lot of Giuseppe's Pizza, but we weren't going inside. Tyler, I said gently, I need you to tell me everything. Everything you've seen, everything you've heard, since your daddy died. For the next hour, my 9-year-old grandson told me a story that would have broken my heart if I hadn't already been preparing for war. Tyler had known something was wrong the night David died. He'd heard Jennifer on the phone with someone, talking in a voice he'd never heard before, cold and calculating. He'd heard her say things like, "It has to look natural," and "make sure there's no evidence." The morning after David's funeral, Michael had moved into the house. Jennifer told Tyler he was a family friend who was going to help them through the difficult time, but Tyler had seen them kissing when they thought he wasn't looking. Over the past 4 months, Tyler had been systematically isolated from everyone except Jennifer and Michael. No school friends could come over. No more visits with me. No contact with his teacher or counselor outside of supervised school hours. But the most damning evidence came from Tyler's iPad. My grandson, processing his grief the only way he knew how, had been making voice recordings for Daddy, talking to David about his day, his feelings, his fears. Those recordings had captured Jennifer and Michael's conversations when they forgot Tyler was nearby. They talked about making you have an accident, Grandma, Tyler whispered, tears streaming down his face. Just like Daddy. They said you were asking too many questions and you had to be stopped. Tyler, listen to me very carefully, I said, taking his hands in mine. You are the bravest little boy I've ever known, and you're going to be safe now. I'm taking you to stay with some friends of mine, people who will protect you no matter what happens. An hour later, Tyler was safely settled at Detective Ray Morrison's house with Ray's wife, Linda, a woman I'd known for 15 years and trusted completely. Remember what we talked about, I told Tyler as I tucked him into the guest bed. No matter what anyone tells you, no matter what you might hear on the news, you did nothing wrong. You helped save both of us by being brave and smart. Tyler nodded solemnly. Are you going to get them, Grandma? Are you going to make them pay for what they did to Daddy? Yes, sweetheart, I am. At 8:45 p.m., I sat in my living room, recording equipment running, waiting for my son's killers to arrive. Ray was positioned outside with backup, ready to move in the moment I gave the signal, or if the automatic text message sent at 9:15. Everything was in place. Jennifer and Michael thought they were coming to murder a helpless elderly woman who suspected nothing. Instead, they were walking into the most important interview of my career. You know what I learned in 32 years of social work? The most dangerous moment isn't when bad people are planning something terrible. It's when they think they've already won. That's when they get careless. That's when they tell you exactly what they've done and exactly what they plan to do next. At 8:59 p.m., I heard a car door slam in my driveway. Jennifer and Michael had no idea they were about to confess to murdering my son. At exactly 9 p.m., my doorbell rang with the measured rhythm of people who believed they were in complete control of the situation. I took a deep breath, centered myself the way I'd learned to do before entering dangerous homes with violent subjects, and opened the door with a grandmother's welcoming smile. Jennifer, Michael, please come in, I made coffee, just the way you like it. They followed me into my living room, both of them subtly scanning the space in the practiced way of people who were planning something that required no witnesses. What they didn't know was that my bookshelf held a recording device Ray had provided. My phone was set to automatically text him at 9:15 p.m. unless I manually canceled it, and every word they said was being captured for the prosecution that would put them away forever. They had 15 minutes to confess to murder before the cavalry arrived. "Margaret," Jennifer began, settling onto my couch with the same casual comfort she'd shown dozens of times over the years when she was still pretending to be part of our family. "Michael and I have been talking, and we think it's time to discuss Tyler's future. His long-term future." "Of course," I said, pouring coffee with hands that were completely steady. Professional training had taught me that showing fear to predators only encouraged them to escalate their behavior. "I've been so worried about his adjustment to losing David. Children need stability during times of grief." Michael accepted his coffee cup, and I had a moment to study David's killer up close. His hands were exactly what I'd expected, calloused from physical work, with small scars that suggested violence was a regular part of his life. These weren't the hands of a legitimate financial advisor. "That's exactly what we wanted to talk about," Jennifer said. "Stability. Tyler needs a fresh start, somewhere he won't be constantly reminded of his father's death. And frankly, Margaret, at your age, it might be difficult for you to provide the kind of active parenting a growing boy needs." She was testing me, seeing how I'd react to the suggestion that I was too old and feeble to care for Tyler. It was a classic manipulation technique. Make the victim feel inadequate before delivering the real blow. "You might be right," I said mildly. "What did you have in mind?" Time to start applying 32 years of interview techniques. The key to getting dangerous people to confess was making them feel safe, superior, and in control. Let them think they were manipulating you while you gathered the evidence that would destroy them. "We've been considering relocation," Michael said, taking the lead in what was obviously a well-rehearsed presentation. "Somewhere with better opportunities. Maybe overseas." "Overseas?" I let concern creep into my voice, playing the role of the worried grandmother who didn't understand what was really happening. "But Tyler's school, his friends here, his connection to David's memory." "Children are adaptable," Jennifer said dismissively, and I heard an echo of the cold voice Tyler had described from her phone conversations. "He'll make new friends. And honestly, staying here might not be healthy for him. Too many painful memories." "I suppose that makes sense," I agreed. "But overseas seems so drastic and expensive." This was the opening I'd been waiting for. "Well," Jennifer said, exchanging a meaningful look with Michael, "David left us well provided for. The life insurance was very generous." $2.1 million, I said. "That certainly should be enough to start over." The slight pause that followed told me everything. They hadn't expected me to know the exact amount. "You've been following the insurance proceedings?" Michael asked carefully. "Of course. I'm Tyler's grandmother. I want to make sure his inheritance is being managed properly." I took a sip of coffee and watched their faces. "I hope you don't mind, but I spoke with David's bank manager yesterday, just to understand how the accounts were being handled." Another pause, longer this time. Jennifer's composure was starting to crack. "And what did you learn?" she asked. Time to deploy the technique that had never failed me in 32 years of social work. Give the subject a face-saving narrative that allows them to confess without feeling like they're admitting full responsibility. "Jennifer, I want you to know that I understand you've been under tremendous pressure since David's death. Financial stress, single parenthood, trying to manage everything alone. And then you met Michael, someone who offered to help, who provided support during an impossible time." Michael leaned forward slightly, intrigued by where this was heading. Sometimes when people are desperate, when they see their whole future threatened, they make choices they never thought they'd make. Choices that seem necessary at the time. "Margaret," Jennifer said slowly. What exactly are you trying to say? I'm saying I understand why you had to do what you did to David. The words fell into the room like stones into still water, creating ripples of tension that I could feel in the air between us. Had to do what? Michael asked, but his voice had changed. The friendly pretense was gone, replaced by the cold calculation of a professional criminal assessing a threat. Help him with his sleep problem, I said gently. David had been having trouble sleeping, hadn't he? The stress of discovering your relationship with Michael, the financial problems you'd been hiding from him, the gambling debts that were threatening Tyler's future. Jennifer's face had gone completely white. So you helped him sleep. Permanently. The caffeine pills in his system weren't to keep him awake. They were planted there afterward, to support the story about someone fighting fatigue who fell asleep at the wheel. You don't know what you're talking about, Jennifer whispered, but her denial lacked conviction. The real cause was something much more effective, something that would put him to sleep quietly, peacefully, before he could cause problems for your future with Michael. Michael started to stand up, his body language shifting from conversational to threatening, but I held up a hand with the kind of authoritative gesture I'd perfected during 3 decades of controlling dangerous situations. Please sit down. I told you. I understand. And I want to help. This was the most dangerous part of any interview. The moment when the subject realizes they're caught but hasn't yet decided whether to confess or eliminate the threat. I was betting that their arrogance would overcome their caution. Help with what? Jennifer asked. With making sure Tyler's future is secure. With making sure your fresh start goes smoothly. With making sure no one asks any more uncomfortable questions about David's accident. I watched understanding dawn on their faces. They thought I was offering to help them cover up the murder in exchange for some arrangement that would let me stay in Tyler's life. What do you want to know? Jennifer asked quietly. I want to know exactly what happened to my son. I want to know how you planned it, how you executed it, and what you're planning to do next. Jennifer looked at Michael, who nodded slowly. They had decided I was manageable, that they could confess to me and then kill me as planned, leaving no witness to their admissions. David found out about Michael and me 3 months before he died, Jennifer began. He threatened to file for divorce and take Tyler. He was going to cut me out of everything, the house, the insurance, even Tyler's custody. So you decided to solve the problem permanently. Michael has experience with these kinds of situations, Jennifer continued, warming to her subject now that she thought she was safe. He knew how to make it look like an accident, how to make sure the insurance investigation wouldn't dig too deep. Tell me about the night he died. Michael took over the story with the pride of a craftsman describing his work. Sleep aids in his coffee. Enough to put him out, but not so much that it would show up as an overdose. Then we put him in his car, drove him to that stretch of Highway 9, made sure he had the caffeine pills in his pocket, and sent him into that tree at exactly the right speed. And the insurance investigation? I have connections, Michael said. People who understand that sometimes accidents need to be accepted quickly, without too many questions, for the right price. Which brings us to tonight, I said, and your plan for me. The look that passed between them told me everything I needed to know. Car accident, Jennifer said matter-of-factly, no longer bothering to hide her true nature. Elderly woman, distraught about losing her son and grandson, fell asleep at the wheel. Very tragic, but understandable. And Tyler? Comes with us to London. New identities, new life. He's young enough to adapt, and eventually he'll forget all about his old family. And if he doesn't adapt, if he asks too many questions about what happened to his father and grandmother? Michael's smile was cold and professional. Children have accidents too, especially in foreign countries where safety standards aren't as strict. That was it. They had just confessed to murdering David, planning to murder me, and threatening to kill Tyler if he became inconvenient. I nodded as if their plan made perfect sense. "There's just one problem," I said calmly. "What's that?" Michael asked. I checked my watch. 9:11 p.m. "Tyler isn't going anywhere with you. He's somewhere safe, with people who know exactly what you are and exactly what you've done. And in about 4 minutes, Detective Ray Morrison is going to get a very interesting text message with a recording of everything you just told me." The moment of silence that followed was the most dangerous of my life. Then Michael lunged across the coffee table toward me, his face twisted with rage. But 32 years of home visits had taught me to always sit closest to the exit. You know what's incredible about people who think they're in control? They never realize when the tables have been turned until it's too late. Jennifer and Michael thought they were coming to kill a helpless old woman. Instead, they walked into an interview room run by someone who'd been getting confessions from killers for over 3 decades. But the most dangerous moment in any confrontation is when cornered criminals realize they've been caught. Michael lunged toward me with the speed and violence of someone who'd done this before, but I was already moving. 32 years of home visits to dangerous situations had taught me to always position myself between threatening subjects and the nearest exit, and I'd been subtly moving toward my front door throughout the entire conversation. I made it to the hallway and yanked the door open just as Michael's hand grabbed my shoulder with enough force to bruise. "Going somewhere, Margaret?" he growled, his grip tightening. That's when Detective Ray Morrison stepped onto my front porch with his service weapon drawn and 2 uniformed officers flanking him. "Actually, Michael," I said, turning to face him with a smile, "I'm not going anywhere. But you are." Ray's voice carried the flat authority of 20 years in law enforcement. "Michael Rodriguez, Jennifer Ashford, you're under arrest for the murder of David Collins and conspiracy to commit murder." Jennifer, still sitting frozen on my couch in shock, found her voice. "This is entrapment. She tricked us into saying those things." "No," Ray said, stepping into my living room while his officers moved to secure Michael with professional efficiency. "This is a grandmother who used 32 years of professional experience to get justice for her murdered son." As they read Jennifer and Michael their rights, I thought about David, about the insurance investigator who'd been too quick to close the case, about the police officer who'd told me to wait until Monday to file a missing person report, about all the professionals who'd failed to see what I'd recognized from the beginning. Sometimes the system fails. Sometimes justice requires someone who understands both how criminals think and how evidence works. Sometimes it takes a grandmother with 3 decades of crisis intervention experience to get the truth that trained investigators missed. "Margaret," Ray said quietly while his officers secured the suspects in the back of their patrol cars, "you realize you could have been killed tonight." "Ray, in my career, I've confronted men who beat their wives to death, mothers who sold their children, predators who manipulated entire families for years. Did you really think I'd let these 2 amateurs intimidate me?" The truth was, I'd been terrified. But terror and competence aren't mutually exclusive. Sometimes being afraid means you're thinking clearly about real dangers and taking appropriate precautions. "How long have you been planning this?" Jennifer asked through the patrol car window as they prepared to transport her to the station. "Since the moment you changed the security codes on David's house," I replied. "A woman who worked domestic violence cases for 3 decades recognizes isolation tactics when she sees them." Over the next 3 hours, as Ray and his team processed the arrests and began building the case, more pieces of the conspiracy fell into place. Michael Rodriguez had 2 previous convictions for insurance fraud in Nevada and Arizona. The accident that killed David was remarkably similar to a case in Phoenix 3 years earlier, where Michael had been a person of interest, but never charged due to insufficient evidence. Jennifer's phone contained text messages with Michael going back 8 months, long before David's death. They detailed the entire plan, including research into David's driving habits, work schedule, and insurance policies. The sleep aids found in David's system weren't from any prescription in his name, but they matched a prescription Jennifer had filled 2 weeks before his death, supposedly for her own sleep problems, though she'd never had any history of insomnia. Most damning of all, Tyler's iPad contained those recordings he'd made for Daddy over the past month. A 9-year-old boy processing grief by talking to his deceased father had accidentally created the most comprehensive evidence file any prosecutor could want. "Margaret," Ray said as we sat in my kitchen at 2 a.m., paperwork spread across the table while crime scene technicians finished processing my living room. "How did you know they'd confess?" "Because in 32 years, I learned that guilty people want to tell someone what they've done, especially when they think that someone is helpless to stop them. Jennifer and Michael spent months planning what they thought was the perfect crime, but they made one crucial mistake." "What's that?" "They underestimated what 32 years of getting confessions from dangerous people had taught me about human psychology. And if they hadn't confessed, if they'd just tried to kill you immediately?" I pointed to my phone, which showed the sent text message at exactly 9:15 p.m. The automatic message was designed to send whether I triggered it or not. The only way to stop it was with a specific code word that would have told you everything was fine. "What was the code word?" I smiled sadly. "David, if my son was truly at peace, you'd know I was safe." By morning, the entire conspiracy had unraveled like a house of cards. The insurance company immediately reopened David's case and began investigating their claims adjuster who'd fast-track the payout without proper investigation. Federal authorities took over the case due to the interstate nature of the fraud, the use of forged federal documents, and evidence suggesting this was part of a larger criminal network. The offshore accounts were frozen, and the money was traced back through a complex web of financial transactions that revealed Michael's connections to organized crime. Tyler's college fund, which Jennifer had illegally accessed, was restored with full interest and penalties paid by the insurance company as part of their settlement to avoid a lawsuit. Most importantly, Tyler was safe. Physically safe, legally safe, and beginning the long process of healing with the help of trauma counselors who specialized in child witnesses to violent crimes. You know what I realized that night? The hardest lesson about people isn't that some of them are evil. It's that evil often comes disguised as someone you're supposed to trust. Jennifer had been part of our family for 6 years. She'd held Tyler as a baby, shared our holidays, called me mom. But here's what 32 years of social work also taught me. For every person who uses trust to harm others, there are dozens more who use their skills, experience, and courage to protect the innocent. If you've ever had to stand up to someone who everyone else trusted, share your story in the comments below. Sometimes the most important thing we can do is trust our instincts when something feels wrong, even if everyone else thinks we're overreacting. 6 months later, I stood in a crowded courtroom and watched Jennifer and Michael receive their sentences. The judge's words rang through the room with the weight of absolute justice. Jennifer Ashford, life in prison without the possibility of parole for first-degree murder, plus additional consecutive sentences for conspiracy, fraud, child endangerment, and money laundering. Michael Rodriguez, life in prison for murder for hire, plus federal charges for identity fraud, money laundering, and racketeering as part of an organized criminal enterprise. The federal prosecutor called it one of the most comprehensive domestic murder-for-profit schemes they'd seen in decades. During the investigation that followed their arrests, they'd identified 4 other suspicious deaths across 3 states that were now being reinvestigated with Michael as the primary suspect. Tyler, now 10 years old and living with me permanently, didn't attend the sentencing. But that evening, as we worked on his homework together at the kitchen table that had become our new normal, he asked me a question that showed how much healing he'd accomplished in 6 months. "Grandma Margaret, do you think Daddy knows that the bad people can't hurt anyone else now?" "I think he does, sweetheart. And I think he's proud of how brave you were." "Will I be brave like that when I grow up?" I looked at this remarkable little boy who'd survived witnessing his father's murder, being held captive by his killers, and having the courage to help his grandmother save both their lives, and I felt my heart swell with pride. Tyler, you're already the bravest person I know. But more than that, you're kind, you're smart, and you understand that protecting people you love sometimes means doing scary things. Like when you made me pretend to be scared so you could escape. Exactly like that. You understood that sometimes we have to be strategic about being brave. But our story wasn't finished, because 3 months after the sentencing, something happened that turned our personal tragedy into something that could help protect other families across the country. I received a call from Sarah Walsh, Director of the State Department of Social Services. Mrs. Collins, we've been following your case closely, and frankly, it's exposed some serious gaps in how different agencies handle suspicious deaths involving large insurance payouts. We're wondering if you'd be interested in developing a training program. What kind of training program? Elder abuse recognition and intervention, specifically how to identify and document financial abuse that escalates to violence. Your case revealed that the warning signs were there from the beginning, but no single agency had all the pieces. It turned out that Jennifer and Michael had succeeded for as long as they did because of systematic failures in communication between insurance companies, police departments, and social services. Each agency had pieces of the puzzle, but no one was putting them together to see the complete picture. 6 months later, I was standing in front of 200 social workers, police officers, insurance investigators, and family court judges, teaching them what I'd learned from our experience. The signs were there from the beginning, I explained, using Jennifer's systematic isolation tactics as a teaching case study. The immediate changes to security codes after a spouse's death, the rushed insurance investigation, the systematic isolation of children from extended family, the preparation for sudden relocation with liquid assets. But most importantly, I continued, we need to listen when family members express concerns, even if we can't see obvious evidence of abuse. In this case, a 9-year-old boy and a 71-year-old grandmother saved each other because we trusted our instincts when everyone else said we were overreacting. After my presentation, a young social worker approached me with tears in her eyes. Mrs. Collins, I have a case right now that sounds remarkably similar. An elderly client whose daughter-in-law has been making changes to financial accounts after her son's sudden death. The family is concerned, but there's no obvious evidence of fraud. Trust the family's instincts, I said. Document everything they tell you. And remember, the most dangerous time for a potential victim is when they start asking questions about things that don't make sense. That conversation led to an investigation that uncovered another murder for insurance scheme. This one involving 3 deaths over 2 years. The perpetrator was arrested before he could claim his 4th victim. Tyler and I started appearing together at community presentations about family safety and the importance of trusting your intuition when something feels wrong. These presentations were part of Tyler's healing process, turning his trauma into something that could help other families. I was scared, Tyler would tell audiences of parents and grandparents, his voice clear and strong. But Grandma Margaret taught me that being scared doesn't mean you can't be brave. And sometimes kids notice things that adults miss because grown-ups think they already know what's normal. These presentations led to something I never expected. Other children began speaking up about adults in their lives who made them feel unsafe. In the first year after our case became public, 23 children disclosed abuse or dangerous situations to family members who'd attended our presentations. The ripple effects continued to spread. The insurance industry implemented new protocols for investigating claims involving sudden death and large payouts. Police departments began requiring additional documentation when family members expressed concerns about suspicious deaths. Social services developed new screening tools for identifying financial abuse in grieving families. But perhaps the most meaningful moment came on the 2nd anniversary of David's death. Tyler and I visited David's grave together, bringing fresh flowers and Tyler's latest school project, an essay about heroes that had made his teacher cry. My hero is my Grandma Margaret, he'd written, because she taught me that your inner wisdom matters more than what other people think you should do. When the bad people tried to hurt us, She used everything she learned in her job to save us. She showed me that grown-ups who really love you will always protect you, even when it's scary. And she taught me that sometimes being brave means trusting yourself when everyone else thinks you're wrong. As we placed the flowers on David's headstone, Tyler looked up at me with eyes that had seen too much but had not lost their light. "Grandma, do you think we saved other people by stopping Jennifer and Michael?" "I know we did, Tyler. And I think that's what your daddy would have wanted us to do with what we learned." Standing there in the cemetery, I realized that our worst experience had become our greatest gift to others. The knowledge that families can protect themselves when they trust their wisdom, work together, and refuse to let evil people convince them they're helpless. Today, Tyler is 11 years old, an honor student, and one of the most compassionate children I've ever known. He's also a survivor who knows his own strength and understands that wisdom often comes from the hardest experiences. I'm 72, still giving presentations about family safety, still consulting with law enforcement on complex cases, and still learning new things about the resilience of the human spirit every day. But most importantly, I'm still Tyler's grandmother, still his protector, and still someone who believes that your inner wisdom, that voice that tells you when something is wrong, matters more than anything else in the world. What's the hardest lesson you've learned about people? More importantly, what did that lesson teach you about your own strength? Share your story in the comments below, because real recognizes real, and your experience might help someone else recognize danger before it's too late. Your inner wisdom matters. Trust it. Use it. And never let anyone convince you that concern for someone you love is overreacting. Because sometimes, overreacting saves lives. If this story resonated with you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. And remember, when something feels wrong in your family, trust that feeling. Document what you observe. Ask questions. You might be the only person who can prevent a tragedy. Subscribe for more stories about the strength that comes from trusting your inner wisdom, and hit that notification bell. Because the most important stories are the ones that prepare us to protect the people we love.